Predictable to me. Everything I see is things I've seen before. There's no surprises that I'm seeing. This is human negligence. This is human negligence that took and exposed a population. The population of people that we love and care about. They may not have known this was coming, but we did. We knew what the potential was. And then it happened. This blood's on my hands too as a member of this organization. I didn't do enough over my career. The loss of life is unacceptable. And it was something that could have been prevented. And for me, it's a nightmare. Until I went to hazmat. So we moved back over here about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We sold our house over there. And
you take a ferry?
Originally there was a ferry that went back and forth, and then jet skis. So that's frowned upon. But we started the programs here with jet skis used for high surf rescue with Archie and with that group. And so I started that program with the fire department. Gosh, 20 something years ago. And so a lot of us water patrol guys would go back and forth on skis. So I wouldn't really use it to commute. I'd fly or I'd take the ferry, but for everything else I did come over on a jet ski.
You would fly?
So so they have an airport in the center where the kind of looks like the island dips. There's a saddle, you can barely see land in the middle. There's an airport up there, and so you fly a small, 10-seater, little pond hopper. And then that's how you got to Oahu, that's how you got over here for work.
And how many stations are over there?
Well, county 2.5. So you've got Ho'olihu as a full station. You got Kaunakakai that's a full station with a tanker tender, and then you've got Puko'o, which was a substation. They've since upgraded some of their staffing, but so 3 stations with creative staffing, and then there's an airport rescue firefighting station up at the airport, and then there's a National Park Service station down in Kalapapa that's staffed kind of cross-staffed with Park Service folks, and then you got a small DOFA presence with forestry and wildlife with the state. That helps during wildfires, but usually they'll come over from here in more force.
Got it.
So that's part of the 14 stations we have. That's 3 of them.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So you do less with less, right?
Yeah.
So you don't do more with less.
Well, they like to think, right? I mean, that's what administration wants: more with less.
Yeah. So it's and so when you come over here and you work with all kinds of resources, it get to a point where you can function in a high resource available environment. In fact, you start to order up more than you need sometimes. But I think it's a good one-way door to have a perspective of figuring out what you can accomplish with very limited resources, because then you can respect when you got the right ones. But if it's the other way around and you go into that environment, like your mind starts thinking about all these tools you have, and you really don't have them. And Maui's a great example of a community that's grown exponentially in the last 20 years. And has ignored all the planning that was previously done to expand those fire stations, and they're on the books. They've been presented to council. It's been in strategic plans, and for the last, at least the last 2 fire administrations, that none of those plans have been continued. And so you had Kaanapali 2020. There were supposed to be 2 more fire stations on this side. There was supposed to be an extra piece of equipment go up to Napili. And so that kind of has a factor role in some of this. You have wildfire mitigation through good weed abatement programs and code enforcement and community planning, and then you have the resources that respond to it to fight the fire on their terms. Well, what resources are those? Yeah. And when you stretch yourselves too thin and you're sending resources up cooler for that problem, and then you have nothing left here or very limited, and you can get quite interesting. You're going to get overwhelmed quick. So.
Sorry, more than a hair. So you're good. You're good now.
I'm also going to warn you guys. I'm going to be critical of local union leadership. I was a division chair, and I'll say that. But I bleed IFF, and I love the IFF's agenda. But I am not in agreement, and I'm starkly opposed to the way that local union leadership has collaborated, or a lack thereof, with managing these issues for the fire service in Hawaii, because it's resulted in a lack of staffing, it's resulted in a lack of progression. The thumb's on us, and all it is vote your paycheck. And there's a strong thumb, and there's no freedom of these firefighters. They will be retaliated against by chief officers because they have no protection during promotion processes. So if they just want you either kiss the ring or you're done.
You get mowed over.
That's right, ostracized or whatever it looks like. And so people, good firefighters that are very smart with strong voices, can't get those voices up, and it's also voices that are suppressed by the union. And the evidence of that is that you have a plethora of IFF programs, and they just really don't exist here. And you got to fight tooth and nail to get them. Yeah. And then when you have GIS studies that would have erased our department and stood up a one that was based on, say, 1710, it's not about having a firefighter in every corner. It's about figuring out how to protect what you got and have a logical, data-driven discussion about where you could go to serve the community based on your suburban environment. And they both the fire chief that's current, he was a deputy, and now the fire chief, and our union president squashed it because they don't want to manage those. They don't want to have more ask of more people.
Yeah.
So you're gonna potentially stifle the fire service from being able to effectively serve this community with enough staffing and safety for firefighters because of political reasons, about money, or other reasons and other motives of ego and pride. So I am not a supporter of the HFA leadership whatsoever. Okay. And I love Frank Lima, and I love him as our secretary treasurer, and I've known him for a very long time, and our District 10 VP. I have nothing against them, but I asked a simple question: can you help us implement the IFF's agenda in our local? And the answer was, well, why don't you run for president and take over so that you can achieve that, because we're not going to meddle with that. That's an important thing for members to understand. You know what I mean? So I'm not happy about it, because that's also part of what got us to this point.
There seems to be, I feel like a lot has been bottled up for a long time here.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of, I don't know why. I don't know enough about it to know, but I feel that as I talk to more and more people, a lot of things have been not addressed or suppressed or not brought to the forefront to go after it. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing or if that is a complacency thing on a societal level.
I'll be able to explain that.
Yeah.
I think it's a cultural thing, but it's because of respect.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
Please. We're good. We're just rolling right into the conversation.
Okay.
So.
Oh, you want us to just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the question?
Well, the question is, I feel like, through conversation, a lot of issues have not come to light until now. And there seems to be this underlying level of angst or anger, if you will, about certain topics. And I feel that, I'm trying to figure out where that comes from, and I don't know if it's a cultural thing, if it is a societal thing, but there's a lot of issues at play here, and I wonder, from the economics through COVID, with the shutdowns, and then from there, we're talking with the fires in Lahaina now, there's the ability for young people not to be able to afford to live on the island. The price of goods have skyrocketed. There's a whole lot of factors here that are societal. And I wonder if it's you're getting to a boiling point here. Talking with you this morning, there's been a lot of conversation about things that need to be changed or fixed or addressed or even start the conversation. So I'm just curious where or how you got to that point.
So you're correct, and I'll start with culture.
Yeah.
Hawaii's, we live in a host culture, of Native Hawaiian host culture, and there's many other cultures that are part of that over history, whether it's workers or people that migrated or came to Hawaii, and it makes up this wonderful calabash of people that live here. However, a stark tenet of our community is respect for elders, respect for leadership. If you go back to the Hawaiian system of both culturally and of governance, the elite or the chiefs were respected.
Yes.
And so when people get legitimate positions of power in modern times, regardless of how they got there, people respect that and they trust that. And many people don't know what they don't know, so they rely on those leaders in specific areas to do the right thing and to know what to do. You're correct about pressures in the community in terms of economics and Hawaii is a dependency model on tourism. While that was something that was tried to be diversified in the past with agriculture, you see a lot of difference that today where it's really heavy on tourism. And whether it was with COVID or post-COVID, that just is what really drives this economy, aside from any other major government influence such as our military that's present here. And so with jobs and the ability to live here, you can imagine Hawaii is such a beautiful place. There's a lot of pressure from the outside of people that want to be here. They want to participate and live the dream, right?
Yeah.
That creates a cost prohibitive environment for the people that have lived here for generations or centuries thereof, or even recently to even afford to live here.
Yeah.
And so that causes a lot of friction and angst. So jobs are more competitive. And the money to go around in terms of a tax base is limited, especially with the fragility of the dependency on tourism. But in terms of leadership, one of the Hawaiian principles is kino oi, the pursuit of flawlessness and perfection in everything you do. And so many of us in the fire service, I'll speak for the fire service here in Hawaii, going back to when that was established in Honolulu, I think as far back as King Kamehameha III, and especially with King Kalakaua, fire service has been very progressive and followed that kino oi principle. There's been major events like the fires in Chinatown, where the king wanted to see how the fire response could have been improved, so he sent at the time Princess Liukulani and Princess Kaiulani to Queen Victoria's Jubilee in England. And it was on that journey, visits to San Francisco Fire, visits to DC, FDNY, right. London Fire Brigade, all in an effort to take what the world was offering in terms of fire service progression to bring it back to serve their people. The first steam engine that was ever in the Western Hemisphere was named the Oahu. It was a gift from King George to the Hawaiian monarchy. So Hawaii's fire service, you're talking about one of the most literate nations in the world at that time. First building in the Western Hemisphere to have electricity. Yeah. Iolani Palace. So Hawaii and Hawaiians as a culture are progressive, and so the fire service has traditionally followed that suit. Now, modern times that may not always be the case. You have spikes of that. You have people really committed to the job that take it upon themselves to fulfill that effort, and I'm proud to serve with a lot of those people. But where that gets sideways is with who your leadership is. Yeah. And what direction they have, and that doesn't always happen with the best results.
So, in a society where perfection and innovation and it creates an environment where I've learned that you have to learn your place and things have to be in balance. There's an order to everything that you do. When things go out of order is where there's conflict and friction. That's got to be part of it then.
There is conflict and friction related to this incident. You have firefighters. This is called just old timers like myself, Makuli guys, and there's a lot of us, and then you got younger folks. You can't expect other people to pick your battles and fights, especially when the harm that could come to them. It's even firefighters. Let's speak about firefighters in this case. I think that's what we're talking about. It's a fact that in our system in Hawaii, and I'll speak for Maui County, that you kiss the ring, or you'll be ostracized or worse. And that means that if you want to speak up about something you believe in and it's not popular with the leadership, then you will either not be promoted, you will not be on special projects, you will not be on training cadres, you'll be pushed out of the group, you will not be listened to, unless it's popular with that group. Then good for you, and that becomes very influential, because when that kind of control is upon firefighters, and it can impact their career and their paycheck and how they provide for their family. Yeah. Then they're going to make decisions that are very difficult. Now some of them, you can't ask them to do that, right? They have to be able to be willing to do that themselves. So there's others of us that have taken it upon ourselves to be more outspoken, and we paid the price for that. And sometimes we make mistakes on the way. I mean, I don't know everything. I don't always get it right, and there's 100 situations where I wish I could go back and maybe change the way I talked about something, or
Sure.
the passion or the burnout that was involved could have been curtailed. But it's important to assess that, because if there's something that's important to make a change that's beneficial to the public or beneficial to the health and safety of the firefighters, and that's not able to be organically curated,
Right.
and supported, then we got a problem that will span decades. And this whole what happened here at this incident didn't just happen overnight. This was a culmination of events that was established over decades, in different ways, and so that we've all inherited at this moment in time. But definitely that friction is a component of it, because it's what caused many of the things that could have happened to prevent this incident from happening.
It's interesting. That's the first time in my conversations in the last few days that prevention has been brought up. I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit. You have over 27 years here in the Maui Fire Department, correct, Captain?
Yeah, was going on 27, yes.
So, you've been around a long time. You're a veteran of the fire service here. You're involved very much so in the community. So, when you go out and say prevention and say that this was a culmination of a lot of things that added up to what happened that day on August 8th with the fires, I'd love for you to just expand on that a little bit so I get a better understanding of what you're talking about.
So yeah, correct. I started my career here in 1996 with Maui Fire. Before that, I started my career beginning in California in 1989 in the fire service. And so my original lens was in California with wildfires in the Orange County and the Los Angeles County area, incidents that I was involved with, whether it was the riots in 1992 or the firestorms in 1993. I was on one of the first strike teams into Laguna Beach in the firestorms in 1993. And so I've got to see, where I saw command posts overrun. I've seen, things I've never seen as a very young firefighter.
Yeah.
Fire whirls, hundreds of feet tall, multiplied by hundreds in Laguna Canyon. Go into a subdivision that were assigned on independent action and see 40 homes on fire at once. Yeah. So I learned very early what this was all about, and I saw both the occurrence during the fight and the many times that day that maybe our crew almost didn't make it. But we did make it, and I also saw the aftermath to a community and what fire behavior did in those communities. So I became, very involved in understanding wildfire management as a preventative measure. And in California, the weed abatement, we call them weed abatement, but weed abatement and wildland fire management programs are very prevalent, and there's a strong daily effort to manage brush in the wildland-urban interface and to have defensible space around those communities,
right.
and strong plans in terms of how to walk fires around those communities and not suffer the impacts when that isn't done. And that can go also into building construction standards. What roof types, what types of exterior building materials you're utilizing are non-combustible, soffit, venting issues, everything, even the windows that have insulation, and just again defensible space fire-wise type communities. Now all that lens of information transferred with me when I started my career in the Maui Fire Department, and so my entire career was spent also paying attention to that, and whether the more suburban communities I worked at here on Maui, but especially in the remote community I worked in Molokai. We partnered with the U.S. Fire Administration and the U.S. Forest Service and the National Park Service and the Department of Forestry and Wildlife, and countless hours and programs spent developing wildfire management plans for the islands of Molokai, and then I know there were some efforts here in West Maui as well to identify how to protect these communities. That was also a heavy influence and an ask on our code, our Maui County code, with the codes we adopt. To just simply have what's on the books of a defensible space to a property boundary of 30 feet is with the types of wind-driven fire behavior we have. Santa Ana winds essentially on a daily basis with trade winds.
Yeah.
You got to plan for that a little differently, and in those codes, usually the fire chief can have distances of vegetation management far beyond that. And that's within the fire chief's purview. But let's just say that a lot of that doesn't occur. We should ask the question when you drive around Maui now, what go look at the urban interface areas that didn't burn,
That's right.
and just ask yourself, is that really defensible space? What happened after sugarcane? Sugarcane, in some ways, and I don't know if this is brought up, but protected the community of Lahaina. It's basically as far as you can, down to Old Walu area and Malka up the mountain, all the way around the communities of Lahaina, up around Lahaina Luna, back down all to the north end of Waikuli, Colma Village, Waikuli, and lately Homesteads to the Civic Center. That was all cane.
Yeah.
And cane behaves very differently, and it was managed very well. And when that agricultural industry left, there was inadequate planning to know that fallow cane would turn into fire-dependent grasses. And we've had fire after fire after fire in these areas. We had a fire incident under Hurricane Lane that almost had a little bit different wind conditions, but almost did the same thing that just happened.
Yeah, that was 2018.
That's correct, I believe.
Yeah.
And so, what lessons did we not learn from that? And we in the same area where this fire ran through and took homes, that started that. So prevention-wise, we should ask the question, what was the defensible space adjacent to these structures and these communities, these subdivisions? What was the identification of the continuity and the arrangement of fuel? What was the assessment of that fuel? What was the assessment of that building construction, that area? What did you think wasn't going to happen?
Yeah.
And then you throw a very limited amount of resources, which are already tasked. This community has grown exponentially, and it has not kept pace with the fire resources that should be provided to it. And prevention has a big role in that as well. Let us fight the fire on our terms. Let us fight the fire with good defensible space, with reasonable, adequate resources. And I think you would have seen a different result. You could have incentivized building construction standards to get rid of shake roofs or other combustible siding materials and incentivize that. You could have had stronger public education programs to go out and really emphasize and educate the community what they could do to prepare their homes. And you could have also trained the community to be more prepared to know when this happened, what they could do in a safe way, to whether it was evacuation or whether it was how to maintain firebrands collecting like snow on your lanai, to mitigate that with a bottle of water.
Right.
So I'm kind of jumping around a little here, but
no, but it sounds like there's so many things here, and I guess the question, the next logical question is why wasn't more mitigation taken? Why wasn't there more of a stance on prevention? I know yesterday through the conversations, when we drive through here, we go up the bypass, right? And I'm trying to paint a picture for the people that are listening to this, but at one time, all those flat lands that are dry grass now used to be plantations.
correct. That was all sugarcane.
Which was well maintained, well irrigated.
And when it was cultivated, it was burned, but it was done with a lot of resources.
Right.
And cane burns were if you want to learn how to do a fire operation, you can talk to the folks that did that. They were very good at it.
I bet. And now it's become as that has left the area, that agriculture has left the area. It's now barren land.
Correct.
And it's just dry grass. It's tinder.
We have exponentially expanded our surface area and linear feet of connection to an urban interface environment.
Okay.
And we, in my opinion, the wildfire management in those areas is remiss and negligent. And we can put it on the property owner. We can say, oh yeah, hey property owner, that's your responsibility.
Yeah.
And if something happens that impacts your neighbor or the environment or another property, well, that's a civil liability issue. Well, you've heard that for years. But who's responsible to lead that effort and enforce it? Who's responsible to lead the charge in educating in the community and identifying that threat? What's the antithesis is they think that there's satellites from outer space shooting laser beams to light this fire. I mean, are you serious?
Right.
I mean, this is sadly very predictable to me. Everything I see out in the field is things I've seen before, whether it's been at structures lost in wildland fires, regular structure fires, or large catastrophic wildfires in California, or even smaller fires that have taken multiple structures here on Maui, and so this is there's no surprises that I'm seeing, and so this is human negligence. This is human negligence that took and exposed a population. Expose the population of people that we love and care about, that they didn't know, they may not have known this was coming, but we did. We knew what the potential was, and then it happened. And this blood's on my hands too, as a member of this organization. I didn't do enough over my career to convince the people or be part of that team discussion to make these changes occur. And it's just devastating. The loss of life is unacceptable, and it was something that could have been prevented. And for me, it's a nightmare. Yeah. And so right now we're focusing all our positive energy on serving the people and giving them every ounce of what we have to heal and to do what we can from this point forward. But at some point there will be that reckoning of what happened and why. And I think we're going to teach the world about how a community comes together and sticks together and tries to rise up from a tragedy like this. But we're also going to show the world what not to do and how not to prepare.
Yeah.
And what happens when you don't.
Yeah.
And when you've been given multiple opportunities, the light bulb comes on. Dude, this almost just happened in 2018. You have multiple weather conditions annually with north winds and standard trade winds and unstable and stable wind conditions that you're presented a footprint of wildland firefighting on a daily basis. I mean, people think of Hawaii as green. They did a picture of Hawaii. They think it's tropical.
I know I did.
I've said it before that we deploy progressive hose lines and attack fires in a very dynamic way with wind-driven fire and without a lot of time on a daily basis year round. And on this side of the island, it's dry all year round.
Yes.
And if it is green, there's still stuff that'll burn, but it's you get maybe a reprieve for a couple months, and then it's back into season. So what gives?
Yeah.
Now I want to make it very clear. The firefighters that day that did that work, that's another part of this. That's our brothers and sisters that go into an environment and they have the courage to go in there and do what they needed to do because they were asked to go do it. And what playing field did we give them? What did we ask those my brothers and sisters to go do that day? They put themselves out there, and there's story after story about what they did and the courage that they possessed to go out and try to get in the way and basically be a speed bump on this incident and help people evacuate and find their way to safety, those that they could. But the higher up leadership, shame on you. Shame on you for putting them in that situation. That's the playing field they deserve. That's the way they're supposed to fight the fire on their terms.
Yeah.
Like that, in that environment, that's respectable leadership. Come on.
I know.
The whole fire service can know we can do better than that. And it's just, and then we lost equipment, but we could have lost several companies with the firefighters that day.
Yeah.
We just lost a brother firefighter not too long ago to a flood incident. I mean, we got to take this stuff seriously.
So I know that day, talked with a lot of different companies, guys that were there. Heroism, asking them to do the impossible. The cards were so stacked against them that day, and yet they were in there doing their job. But even more so, the amount of pride and ownership they take within their own communities.
Yes.
They weren't backing down.
No.
They couldn't. And they carry that today in some of the conversations I've had to see that sense of defeat. They feel defeated. They feel that they should have been able to do more. But with everything you're talking about, they were sent in to do the impossible.
That's a fair statement. I think you bring up a really good point, and forgive me for not saying it. I mean, it's rare in the fire service these days that you live and work in the same community.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct. It's not just about you if you live on the west side. You live on Maui, and
right.
you live in the community that you protect, and your family's there too. And yeah, the firefighters in the Maui Fire Department, I wouldn't choose a better group, and I'm sure, and this is throughout Hawaii, but especially in Maui, there's a lot of pride to serve this community, and it shows on all the days that we have school visits and that we go out and do public interactions and pre-fire planning or all of our interactions with the community. There's a deep love for the community that we serve, and the community trusts us. and were very involved. And so there was I guarantee that there was a lot of pressure on them, because they were fighting for life. I mean, for me, and I won't go too deep into this rabbit hole, but 9/11, I call it, it was a checkmate incident. Our brothers and sisters out there on that day, knew the potential of those buildings coming down, yet they went up and down those structures to try to save one more life. And I have just tremendous respect for FDNY, for the courage that they possessed on that day and the way that they conducted themselves. But it's a moment to identify, well, what checkmate events have I had in my life? I've gotten maybe a couple moves away, some near misses, but nothing like that, where you've made a conscious decision that you may not go home, and you've committed with the brothers and sisters that you have there in that spot, and you're going to go do work to save people. And I think it was very similar for those firefighters on the 8th that were in a situation where they made a conscious decision, and I bet some of them thought they may not go home, but they were going to do everything they could to save a savable life. And that's, as firefighters, I think that, the community, I just pray that they recognize that. Now, so the firefighters, to your point about them thinking that they could have done more, all I can do is ask them. I can't tell them how to feel, but I can tell them as a senior member in the fire service that, they've been raised up by a lot of us old timers, and you don't know what you don't know. A lot of these guys have never seen that before, or never thought that could happen. Yeah. And I think if they would have been exposed more to some of the examples I gave from that I had earlier in my career, and they would have had more progressive emphasis on both wildland fire management and urban interface type fires and the devastation there, and how our community mirrored or exceeded the threat assessment or threat profile or risk profile, whatever you want to call it. They're so intelligent, they would have said, we need to fix this. Yeah. But then we get back to the political environment. Well, what voice do they have before they get squashed? And so and then that beautiful respect for leadership above them. You can't delegate away responsibility, right? So when I promoted through the ranks, and this goes back to your point, I didn't say I'm going to take a promotion. I didn't take it. I had a crew of firefighters that believed in me and raised me up and said, hey, Greg, we think you're ready for the next step. Yeah. At that fledgling level, to be a driver. And then I go through the process of testing for that, and then I'm at a point where I'm offered that position by the chiefs because they maybe agree with it, that I'm ready for it. And then I have to accept responsibility for the position that I'm about to endeavor on. And it comes with a responsibility. Driving a fire apparatus with a crew of people, it's a big responsibility. Sure. And they carry that forward into being an officer. It's no different. And I said the same thing every time. Imagine being a chief officer. So how do you go into a spot and say, oh, that's not my fault, that's not my responsibility? You accept it. So as an organization, we have to accept responsibility for where we were at, and I would beg those firefighters to know that they did everything that they could that day. Yes. And it wasn't about the lack of their effort. They did everything. It was beyond what I would ever have asked them to do if I was leading them. But they were handed an environment. They were handed an incident that was impossible, and whether that was decades of again wildfire management practices and preventative and code enforcement, coupled with proper resources availability and et cetera, then that would have been that's a fair situation for them.
Speaking to that, talking with some of these crews, the engine crew that we spoke with, the harrowing operations that were occurring, and so rapidly, the rapid deterioration, the rapid fire growth, the fire was just consuming neighborhood after neighborhood, and the speed in which it did that was incomprehensible. It's hard to even imagine what they were dealing with. It was a true firestorm, if you will. Yeah. They take such ownership because they knew auntie and uncle. They knew the history and lineage of so many buildings and homes. They know the residents by name. Firefighters go to fires in neighborhoods that they serve in. They're sworn to protect, volunteer, career, it doesn't matter. You're sworn to protect and provide life safety measures in your neighborhood. These people are heavily entrenched in this community. They came from this community. They're second, third, fourth generation
Correct.
in this community. They are all in. The scars that will come from this are devastating for them, not just the community, but they were sworn to protect that day, and they carry that burden, and they're going to carry that for a long time to come. And seeing that on them yesterday and the day before as we talked with them, it's guys like you that absolutely have to be a part of that healing process for them, where your experience and knowledge as a senior man is so important today. And I firmly believe that. I know, almost going on 30 years in the fire service myself, it's us that needs to help guide going forward, and I know you all are. I know how important that is.
I think just our presence too, to your point, like,
Yeah.
I think early on some of them, we called them Makuli guys, there's retirees that came out of the woodwork, you know, you had some stuff that officially was asked through the EOC with points of distribution, which myself and a few other retirees worked on.
Yes.
We had tremendous support from outside fire departments within the state, from just about every jurisdiction. Came out to support us at those points of distribution, and I'm very disappointed to say that if there's any retaliation for those folks that took time off to come out to help us to serve this community, you know, that's BS, and you know, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But without those brothers and sisters that came out from those fire agencies to support those efforts in the public distribution in the midst of chaos, there's people that wouldn't have been served. There's more people that wouldn't have been fed. There's people that wouldn't have got essential services. And so I'm really proud of not just that effort that was with the fire group, but also all the other organic points of distribution that came up in the communities that rallied together to serve their individual neighborhoods at a neighborhood level. There's other retirees that came out to work some of the operations during the USAR effort. I won't go into details there, but a large group of retirees came out and volunteered. And I think when we were around those younger firefighters, you know, after we've retired, you know, it's just a quiet presence, and they know that we're with them.
Yeah.
And I do agree that has an impact, because a lot of these guys, whether I trained them in a recruit class or they were on my crews, you've seen them grow up to be officers. They're just they're family.
Yeah.
And so just because you retire doesn't mean you're not a firefighter.
That's right.
And so whatever leadership, you know, all of a sudden we leave and we're damaged goods and you don't talk to us anymore. We're coming back, and we'll be with our brothers and sisters.
Right.
You don't worry about that.
Yeah.
You know, and we're not going anywhere. So I think that is part of the leadership still, is that we can show them a path forward, that we're all in this together, and that we care and love for each other in the community that we live in, that we're a part of, that we lost. And I do agree with that. And to your point about the fire and then their disappointment, you know, we all know that with wildland urban interface, you know, you have different heat profiles.
That's right.
You know, grass and, you know, light flashy fuels do one thing, but once it gets into those structures, it changes the heat profile, which intensifies and becomes it prepares the structures next to it to burn. And then you know, like when we make you know, pulehu or barbecue here in Hawaii, or whether you're at a training center and you're getting a fuel package ready for a live fire burn, you know, once you light it with the torch, the next thing you do is you take a leaf blower to it, and we all know what that does. It makes a perfectly developed, fully developed fire, and that's what those guys had. They had basically a leaf blower going through a fuel package, and they were asked to go jump in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so, on a micro term, that's what they dealt with on a macro level.
Knowingly putting themselves in the path of what was coming to provide a half a second of protection for those escaping, fleeing, trying to get or save one structure. Valiant efforts. Valiant. Knowingly putting themselves in harm's way that day. And the stories that we've heard time and time again, it's just nothing short of a miracle that they all went home that day.
I've heard some of the stories. I've kind of been disconnected because I'm still so busy with the efforts I'm still involved with.
Yeah.
But I hear some of the stories and they slowly get pieced together.
Yeah.
I do concur with you. There's just some you know, heroic efforts and commitments that day. And in addition to the folks that were fighting the fire up in Kula.
Yeah.
The BC that was on duty for that fire, he was my BC when I was still working. Hell of a guy and a great leader. And and he was doing everything he could with the resources he had to protect that community up there. And meanwhile, that was drawing resources away from these guys down here. So they didn't have maybe everything they could have over here as well. So definitely harrowing efforts. And there's folks that came in from off duty, and I know there was even people grabbing their POVs and getting out there with their gear and doing everything they could to help get people get to safety.
So Greg, you talk about leadership within the department. That comes in many forms. So you have your administration, but you also have the union. The union is IAFF.
Correct.
So I'm just curious how that kind of all fits into the equation as well.
So we have a very interesting labor management relationship here in Hawaii. The union is very strong and a very strong large local within the IAFF. I'm very proud of the IAFF's response to support at this incident. I know a lot of the peer support folks, going back to the Drew Keane from FDNY that came out to train us in the peer support training that we got a grant for 4 years ago, and that I saw their peer support folks on the ground providing support to the firefighters and the folks in the field. And I'm sure there's some other big level items I don't know about that the IAFF was here. I did see Frank Lima and some of our union leadership from DC and abroad come out. But locally, I'm very disappointed. Labor management to me is the 3 C's: collaboration, communication, and mutual credit. And that happens over decades.
Yeah.
And I am not a guy that votes his paycheck. I depart from the IAFF on that note. I'm a citizen of our country first. I vote our Constitution. I vote the laws and rule of law and order and community that gives us the fabric of how we exist, which is everything around me. Everything I serve, my community. I vote my community. And if I do a good job supporting that community, then I may be blessed to have a job, and I may have a community that has an economic, viability that allows me to get paid well for that job.
Right.
I won't make decisions otherwise. But that being said, our local here, focuses really mainly on that. If you ask the question, what IAFF programs exist throughout this state, on the menu of programs, the millions of dollars that the IAFF has invested, whether it's in medical alternate duty assignment, whether it's in peer support, whether it's in GIS studies for NFPA 1710 considerations for resource deployment and standards of cover and resource deployment. We've turned away all of it locally. There was a GIS study that was offered to us that we were signed up for that was dismissed both by our fire chief and our union president.
Yeah.
Local, not our IAFF president. After the IAFF supported it happening, which would have erased the Maui Fire Department and stood it up based on our statistics and identified all of our resource gaps. And we could have used that to at least maintain the resources that we currently have as data-driven, informed decisions to our elected officials, but also look forward to what we needed to protect our communities and serve our people. And when those things are just because whether it's arrogance or egos or pride or agendas, that gets in the way. And so as a former division chair, the reason I didn't run for re-election is because I was hitting brick walls locally. And when you ask the IAFF leadership to say, hey, can you please help me implement the IAFF's agenda for the local in Hawaii? And they go, well, brother, then you should just run to be the leader of that local because we can't really find a mechanism to help you with that. What do you think happens over decades with the labor management relationship? Where do you think the ability of the voice and the independence of the firefighter goes? It gets squashed.
Right.
And then the only thing left is administration that can put their thumb over that firefighter. Even our promotional processes. They do not follow examples like you'd have in DC or examples that you'd have in the Illinois, I think it's Promotional Act. The tenets of examples of allowing firefighters to rise up in their organizations and be who they are constructively without the form of retaliation. and labor has basically stepped away from that.
Yeah.
And so you have an environment where progressive fire service and progressive firefighters, have to face retaliation on a daily basis for doing the right thing. And when that happens over a number of years, like I said, decades, and then you have a lack of other programs to support all the things that would make a fire department healthy, to have that strong labor voice, it's just one-sided.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be fixed. And I'm not saying that those leaders that we have now need to go. They just need to make a turn. And they need to see this and know that this is on them too. And that all the resources that they could ever imagine are sitting with our IFF waiting to help us.
Yeah.
And so I suggest that we make a turn and we accept those resources, and we make this local the most progressive IFF local in all of the IFF. That's my suggestion, because it sure as hell hasn't been. So,
You talked about the ongoing efforts. You're involved. You've been involved from the get. I know that you were an instrumental part of coordination, getting resources, providing support, and now moving forward, you're still a part of the process. Talk to me a little bit about where we are today and where we're headed with the process of what's happened.
Yes, for me, I just consider myself hopefully a functional member on a team of people, right? It's nothing that I do that I'll take any credit for. It's the people that raised me up to be who I am today in the fire service, and the people I still get to work with, and together we're really strong. I leave my ego at the door. I'm never the smartest person in the room, and together we make the best decisions, and usually the outcome hopefully will be the best it can be. So I think that's the mantra that all of us take, and the folks that I work with, whether it's the retirees or even in the areas I'm involved. I've still, we had the initial days after. We all know that there was it's called Phase 0, the USAR effort, and addressing any post-fire operations and the recovery of human remains. That was assisted, by some groups. I was involved a little bit in that. We had the points of distribution, which were critical. That was a far more important thing, I thought, because we were getting aid to the people and coordinating with all the community groups. The West Maui Community Aid stood up and was helping to help provide intel on all those efforts and needs for the community. That many being that fled north to Honokauai and Kahana, Napili areas, Kapalua, in addition to Central Maui and other places. So that aid effort was really important. We were involved in that. And then we moved into the, it's known to be Phase 1 of the operation, which is household hazardous waste removal. And there's efforts I'm involved with there with my hazmat experience.
Yeah.
And then when that comes to a close, I know that there's discussions that I don't follow them too closely, but I know there's a discussion about strategic reentry for families to get back to their homes safely, to be able to get closure, and then that will transition into some way into like Phase 2, they call it, from what I understand, which is going to be your general cleanup.
Yeah.
And and of course, due to structural instability in the burn area and other factors, you can't get rid of all the hazmat and hazards, in the earlier stages that there are now. So those will have to be addressed ongoing, and there'll be many hazards still out there that will be addressed until cleanup is complete. I think that another really critical aspect that I think that the community is very proud of is the cultural monitoring component.
Yes.
The West Maui community and the cultural practitioners that have been involved. They've got boots on the ground that are out there trying to protect our cultural resources, our iwi kupuna, our modern iwi that passed in the fire, other historical structures, plantation era considerations and all those cultures. Trying to make sure that whatever is happening in the field, from the initial phases moving forward, that there's not further harm caused by causing any damage or destruction or disrespect to that. So I think that's a very important aspect that we hope to see, develop ongoing moving forward.
What do you hope for going forward? I mean, there's a lot here that we've unpacked, and from prevention to the community to the future. What do you hope for?
Well, I hope that the community continues to come together
Yeah.
to find a way to progressively heal. I hope that that we do a rapid assessment of all of our existing communities on Maui that haven't had fire issues, and that we pull our head out of our ass and we fix it now.
Yeah.
I hope that the official efforts that are being managed through our county, state, and federal government and all the other partners involved are successful for an end result that the community can be proud of.
It's such a all-consuming project. There's so many layers, right? We've been talking about, you peel back one layer, there's another one right behind it, something else that needs to be addressed. Speaking with a lot of the cultural leaders while we've been here and understanding the need for cultural sensitivity when it comes to those properties. It's not just the property, it's a generational property that could potentially have family members buried on site. It's sacred. There's a spirituality involved that needs to be addressed. And I think that's something that was really important for us to learn while we've been here, is that this is not just go in and clean up. There is a lot more to the process. And healing is part of that process.
Yes.
Throughout the interview today, it's emotional still. And it will be going forward, I'm sure, because I know how proud you are, and so many of you are so proud of the communities in which you live, protect, serve. And going forward, it's going to be a long process, and it's going to require a lot of healing along with it.
We have some strong community leaders on the Hawaiian side, and also overall for Maui Nui. And I think that path forward in terms both for cultural and just general community healing moving forward is in good hands. And I think another thing that you mentioned in the previous question about what I would hope for forward is in relationship to that with the cultural side is just that the trust, that there's transparency and trust moving forward with all of the official actions that are taking place, because I know there's a lot of, whether they're conspiracy theories or the actions of our current government officials. I hope that the community can quickly get their arms around that and really believe in the path moving forward.
Yeah.
That'll be part of that healing, and it'll be also part of their confidence that those cultural sensitive aspects are going to be taken care of. Because that's just going to cause more stress.
That's right.
If you don't address that, you're causing perpetual stress, and so I would want nothing more than the stresses to be hopefully kind of alleviated through good process and ways forward that the community really believes in.
Yeah.
Because that'll let them do like what I'm doing is put my head down and work. That's what firefighters do.
That's right.
That's how we cope a lot of times. We got to stay busy and we got to keep working. And that'll give them something to look forward to, something for them to work towards as a community, which is very healthy. It's a very good coping mechanism.
Yeah.
That you're doing something to help, and everybody can help. You don't have to be a firefighter to help this process heal. If you're part of, we're one community, and we just happen to be firefighters in that community. So I would say you're not joining us. Firefighters are joining the community to make this right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I see it. And we have our homogenous group, right? But and we see things differently on our own terms, and we'll have to continue to work individually as a unit, as a fire service there, and moving forward. But
I think the last piece too is it's a very close community, and there's a lot of people that are going to be coming back to Maui now. There's been a pause on the invitation for the outside world to come, because there's been time for healing, time for addressing their own communal issues with the fire and all of that. And I think what has to come from this too is an understanding there needs to be a level of respect and dignity. And I think that it's so important that they're given their time and their space, and that the outside public needs to give them that time and respect the lands that were damaged or destroyed that day, because there is so much spirituality and heritage to it all.
I concur with you on that. I think that that tourism reopens up. I think there's some date, I haven't been watching the news, but there's some date soon that's restoring. And we have a lot of people in these properties, one of which we're at now, and in other hotels that have been displaced.
Yes.
I know there's processes to try to clean that up, but it seems a little off-putting that that tourism will return in the effort to try to restore dollars back to the community and get people back to work so they can stop suffering economically. I understand that importance,
Sure.
but now where are all those people going to go that were being housed, and then how's that going to go over in a community that's going to be coping with this and healing from this for some time? And I can't imagine there's not going to be some friction with visitors that come and experience that, and there's nothing I can say on either end of that. If someone comes here to visit and they get that kind of negative feedback to their visit, I think they're going to have to I just hope they understand that where that's coming from, and then please don't push back on that member of the community.
Please respect what's happening.
Please respect that, and then on the other side, I just hope that doesn't turn into some type of an altercation or something bad. So I mean, it's at that level. I mean, you're talking about there's people right now, when they don't know who you are and you're here, and they know you're not from Maui. They could be ready to scrap. And so you're visiting Maui. It's a balance, right? I mean, economically, I understand the needs for people to go back to work and the amount of money that's being lost per day that's going to hurt families even more, balanced with the healing part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm not as privy to all those details, but I hope that the people in charge of figuring that out have considered all those things, but we are our tenant is aloha.
Yes.
So fundamentally, we have to find aloha in this. We have to everything we do, we just need to act with aloha, and hopefully, even if we're not happy with something, we can get through it.
Greg Jenkins, thank you, brother. I appreciate you joining me today. I truly do. A really great conversation. I wish you nothing but support, and I know that you're working hard to get the communities back on their feet. I know how much pride and love you have for the fire department here, as well as the community in which you live and protect. I just appreciate you taking a few minutes today and sitting down with me. Truly do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you.